Hello. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the concept of an array. An array is a very important concept in computer science. We use it all the time when we write games and programs. In fact, you're looking at an array right now. This is called the VLA, which stands for Very Large Array. It's a big line of radio telescopes down in New Mexico that listens to signals from outer space. Now, notice it's not just one telescope. It is a line of telescopes all right next to each other. And that's basically what an array is. So just keep that in mind as we move forward in this video. Now, we've talked about variables already. A variable is really just like this little storage place that you see down here on the bottom left. And when I create a variable called x, what I'm doing is just grabbing a little memory cell, reserving a memory cell, and sticking a value in it. So if I say x equals 0, I'm telling the computer, hey, I need a memory cell, put the number 0 in it. So that's basically all a variable is. It's just a named memory cell. Now, this is great, but what if I have a list of 10 high scores or something like that? Or I need to have 10 inventory slots. What if I have more than one thing to keep track of? Isn't there a way I can just reserve a block of something? Well, yes, that's called an array, and that's what I'm going to teach you now. So there we go. So back to our analogy with variables. A variable is a single storage place. Well, what we're going to do is go from this to this. So here's an array of storage cells. There's actually, looks like 5 of them here. So this would be an array of 5 storage cells all right next to each other. Now let's take this analogy and move it over to computers. So here's an array of 9 integers. There's nothing special about the number 9. It's really just all I could fit in the diagram. You could have an array be 5 things long, 10 things long, 100 things long. So here's an array of 9 integers. Now, every little slot here that you see on the right is called a cell. So an array is made up of elements called cells that contain the values that you're storing. Now, what does it look like to create an array in code? There we go. It would be an integer array named myArray equals a new array of 9 integers. That's kind of how you read that. But notice the little brackets with the number 9 at the end. That's you're saying I don't want one integer, I want a block, or I want an array of 9 integers. Now don't worry about the code because I'm going to show you that in another video, but that's how you would declare it. Now, we have a bit of a problem because now that my array name refers to 9 things, how do I say which one I want? Well, I need a special number, or an extra number, called an index. Now the index says which cell I want to access. Now indexes have a special property. They start at 0. So when you have an array, for example, that's 10 things long, the indexes will go from 0 to 9. So just be very careful about that. If you have an array of 10 things and you try to access the 10th element, you will actually be going past the end of your array and you will create an exception. So if you want the last thing in a 10-element array, it's going to be that array sub 9 using the angle brackets. And I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so moving on here. So just important point, indices start at 0. So here's an array, and then we're going to issue the command myArray sub 5 equals 15. So I'm saying I want to change the value of whatever's at index 5 to 15. So notice that index 5, I'm going to count down because I put the indexes here on the left. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So index 5 is actually the 6th thing in the array. Now I'm going to hit... I'm going to go to the next slide, and you'll see that now 15 is in the slot with the index 5, right? Now let's change another cell here. So what I've done is I've put 999 in the arrays in the cell with the index 0, right? So array sub 5 is 15, right? So the cell with index 5 is 15, and the cell with index 0 is 999. How do I get stuff out of an array? It's going to look a little like this. So I'm going to create an integer called y, and I'll set it to myArray sub 0. So that's how you pronounce those angle brackets, right? The angle brackets are pronounced sub. So int y equals myArray sub 0. So that means go to myArray and get the thing at index 0, which is 999. So that's how you get values out of arrays and put values into arrays. So that's some background on arrays. Now let's take a look at how we can actually use them in programs. Arrays are fantastic for modeling groups of objects when you know the number of objects in the group is never going to change. So let's look at some situations where we see that in games. Here's a Monopoly board. The number of cells on this board, the number of squares where the player can land, is never going to change. You're never going to randomly get a new property. So you can model the Monopoly board as an array of properties. Now you just have to be very careful that when you go off of Boardwalk, you go back to index 0. Otherwise, you're going to go off the end of your array. All right, what else? Here's a submarine. Notice it has torpedo tubes on the front. So if I were modeling the submarine, I would model this object as having an array of 6 torpedo tubes. Arrays excel at inventory. Here's your Minecraft inventory screen, and notice at the bottom there are these cells, which are circled, where you keep the items that you want to bring up quickly using the keyboard. The number of cells is never going to change, so that is probably modeled as an array. What else? Pitfall has 255 levels, probably modeled as an array of level data. And most interestingly, how could sports teams be modeled as an array? Well, there's only a certain number of players allowed on the field or on the court at any one time. So I might model them as an array. Now the team may be much bigger than that, and it may grow and shrink. So I would model all the players on the team, maybe using a list or a set, but then the players who are actually in the game at that moment, I would model them using an array. So there you go. There's some specific ways you might use arrays. Now let's just kind of recap what we've been talking about. Arrays model groups of objects. Arrays are fixed in size. When you create that array, you give it a size, and that size never changes. The individual elements of the array live in cells, and to specify which cell you want, you have to use an index, a special number called an index. And most importantly, indices start at 0. Never go past the end of your array, or you're going to have problems. Now, if you can just wrap your brain around those few points there, you will be in good shape. And in the next video, I will show you actually how to write some code to create an array and manipulate it. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, as always, please ask.